Welcome back to another episode of Built in Ohio. We have another great Ohio tech story that's doing some incredible work in tech and in innovation and in a space that we haven't really dug into quite so much. So I'm really excited about this conversation. But Dennis, thank you so much for joining. Thanks for sharing the work today that you and the team at Parallax are doing. But if you maybe could tell us a little bit in your own words, what exactly Parallax is, what you're doing, and what part of the state you're in.
So, Chris, thank you. So, Parallax Advanced Research is a nonprofit advanced research organization that sits headquartered in Dayton, Ohio. However, we have employees spread out across the state of Ohio and across the country. And our focus is on bringing together academia, industry, and the government, trying to be something different in Ohio that actually brings and connects academia with industry to transition technologies out of the university to solve government problems or commercial problems across the state, across the country, or the world for that matter. We recently merged with the Ohio Aerospace Institute out of Cleveland, which gives us the statewide footprint that we're looking for to support applied research and development across the state. And what that means is typically a university does some very basic fundamental research. And generally, it's very difficult to move that research from a university to a business. And we're trying to be that bridge between the two and help accelerate technology development across the state.
Dennis, is there a specific or maybe a few specific examples of the type of technology? You mentioned the Ohio Aerospace Institute and the work there. So I presume that's in kind of as the name implies, the space, no pun intended, that it is in. But what are some other examples that you're focusing in and Parallax focuses on?
So we're really trying to develop advanced research in the state and bring money back into the state from the organizations like DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, IARPA, Intelligence Advanced Research Project Agency. The state doesn't do that well in bringing DARPA dollars back to the state, but it's one of the more innovative federally funded agencies for research. So, so we're actually trying to help companies, but ourselves too, go after and capture and bring that work back to the state. So our areas of focus are AI, machine learning, artificial intelligence. It's also in the area of data analytics. Uh, OEI is very strong in high temperature materials, as well as high-end computational physics modeling and simulation. And then we do a lot of flight testing and evaluation of autonomy systems and fly UAVs all over the country in testing new algorithms, new platforms, and new sensors.
And as you mentioned, Ohio Air or the Cleveland is kind of expanding the geographic footprint, and then also, of course, being based in the Miami Valley in the Dayton region for Parallax. Uh, if you could maybe talk a little bit about the federal institutions and to kind of spoil it a little bit, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, especially NASA Glenn, maybe is another example in the Cleveland area, because I think as we get to do our work and travel the state, those are among the most exciting. And every time I have a conversation that's even in that kind of the general nexus of those two entities, you just learn some incredible technology and you're working in it every day. But I also think that it's one where if you don't live in the Dayton region, if you don't live in maybe certain parts of Cleveland or work in certain industries, they're not incredibly well known to the rest of the state. So if you could just share a little bit about maybe each of those and kind of the role and why it's no accident that these two organizations and your organization, is based in there, and the opportunity for Ohio when we think of DoD and just the amount of research and activity, and why your part of the state is really Ohio's epicenter for that all.
So across the state, of course, up in the Cleveland area, you've got the NASA Glenn Research Center, which is really strong in propulsion, communications technologies, and has been around since the 50s and focused on space and space exploration. That was the beauty of the integration of OEI with us, is their space background. We did not have as much space background in Parallax before that. But here at Wright-Pat in the Dayton area, you have the Air Force Research Laboratory, which does roughly $4 to $5 billion a year in research across the country. But you've also got what's called the Life Cycle Management Center, which is the procurement agency for all flying vehicles for the Air Force.
Wow.
So your F-22, your F-35 are all procured or developed through these offices here. And then in addition to that, you've got the materials, Air Force Material Command, which oversees all the supply and logistics. So roughly half of the Air Force budget, total budget, flows through Dayton and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And then in addition to that, a lot of people don't know about it, is the National Air and Space Intelligence Center. There's roughly 3,000 engineers that day in and day out are analyzing various systems, and they require degrees from materials research to AI machine learning to computer software development. So it's a very technical group that also supports there. So we've had a program for the last 6 years funded by the state. It's called the Ohio Federal Research Network, where we're trying to bring together academia and industry across the state to better support Wright, Pat, and NASA Glenn, both from the workforce development, but also doing relevant research.
Yeah. And you mentioned now for a second time, like AI, machine learning. AI is especially, very newsy these days, but it's an area that you and Parallax and folks in your industry have been focusing and working on for quite some time. As technologies like that go a little more mainstream, and Chat GPT is like the perfect example where we even see teachers talking about it and the implications with students. But as some of those technologies become a bit more mainstream, what is it like being in the space where you've been working in it, and you do work in it and experts in the field? Does it make maybe adoption or increased interest from like Washington D.C. and policymakers who maybe are now seeing real world implications that they can grasp if they don't necessarily come from a technologist background?
It is a bit of a challenge, because one of the challenges with AI machine learning is you have to do a lot of testing and evaluation and make sure that the algorithms function and make decisions properly. So one of the areas we're focused on is understanding how those AI algorithms actually make the decision and giving that information to the user of the product, so they can have some trust in those decisions. I was involved with some work probably 25, 30 years ago where it was first introduced. But the problem that we had was you didn't have enough training data to train the algorithms. A lot of times they'd make the incorrect decisions. With the advent of larger machines and systems and data availability, it's doing a lot better, but it's still an area that is significant work has to be done. And that's some of the work that we're doing at DARPA. So
Yeah. You meant one thing that I had pulled out before we started speaking was the parallax triple helix models, I believe is what it's called. But innovation and connecting, as you said, Ohio's academia, industry, and government. That is in some, and I come from a government background, having served in government, so I see that, but as such a testament, one of Ohio's really differentiators, because we have such a bought-in government at the state level, and if we're talking congressional levels and others, um, academia, where Intel is this kind of this real world example that's being built out in real time with community colleges and 4 years that are working in the space to literally welcome a new national security important industry to the state, but then also industry. And as tech companies are being built from the ground up, or big tech companies are coming into the state, it is an opportunity for Ohio to really stand out and become a welcoming place where that triple helix can operate and really excel. And so from the Parallax side, can you maybe talk to why that is so important? Because sometimes I know government can maybe not see kind of the incentive to work with industry. Sometimes industry can think government works a little too slow, or academia does. But when those areas really come together and click, what is the upside? What is the potential that you have seen in real time?
it's fairly significant. So the Ohio Federal Research Network is probably the closest example of it, where there's 13 research universities across the state, and there's multiple 2 and other 4-year universities across the state too. When I first came to back to Ohio in 2012 and 13 timeframe, what we realized is the universities weren't really well connected to the federal government. They were doing a lot of National Science Foundation research, National Institute of Health, but in working with Wright Pat and NASA Glenn, there wasn't good connected fabric, and I don't quite know what separated it. So we actually ran the program just much like we got 60 million from the state, 51 million exactly. And we put procurements out, and it funded 35 projects across the state that are tied directly to federal needs. So a lead university, a partner university, a business, and somebody doing something that's relevant to the federal government. And those teams have now won roughly $350 million new work and brought it back to Ohio. Part of it is teaching folks how to operate in that space. And part of it is handholding a little bit too, for lack of a better word. University research, we've actually had 12 spinouts out of the program too, out of universities. And so helping folks figure out how to spin the companies out and create the companies, but then on the backside, helping them grow the business from a business development standpoint. A lot of it is connections and being connected. COVID hasn't helped in the last 2 or 3 years, of course. It's made it very difficult. But it's really trying to help connect that academic researcher with the industry folks, where we're kind of the bridge in between to meet a federal need. In fact, we're about to do round 6 here soon on OFRN. We've had 40 government folks come into the room and tell us exactly what they need. So we've captured that. We'll put that on the street competitively. And it'd be an opportunity for the universities and the businesses in the state to address those needs and probably significant follow-on opportunities in the future.
And that also kind of ties into some of the work that your team is doing with entrepreneurial support and building that up in the Dayton region. Launch Dayton is one, and we've gotten to work with some of the team there, and Startup Weeks and others, which are really incredible. And we could probably on the industry side even break kind of that triple helix model of you have entrepreneurs and starting 0 to 1 new companies, and then the big tech companies. But talk a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, about Launch Dayton and some of those entrepreneurial programs and support that you all are doing in the Dayton area.
In close collaboration with the Entrepreneur Center here in Dayton, we've actually been participating downtown for probably the past 8 years, helping try to revitalize downtown Dayton and give new startups an opportunity, and actually sharing how to actually start a company. It doesn't necessarily have to be federally related. It could be commercially related. And then once they get the company started, it's help them navigate, the various funding sources that are available, whether it's state funding or venture capital funding or contractual contract funding from the federal government. So really helping connect the dots, but then also helping them go through the various stages of their company development. One of the things we've done too is somebody might come to us with an idea and they say, we really have a need in this other area. Well, we try to matchmake and connect them up to other entities across the state. We're doing it at the national level too, for the Sivers and Sitter program, SBIR. But it's really about how do you connect those folks? It's having a good Rolodex to be able to do that too.
Yeah, and I'll add on the hub downtown and where the Launch Dayton team is, and as you mentioned, revitalizing downtown. Like you, one of my aspects of the job is I get to travel the state. And Toledo, Cincinnati, Dayton, Akron, Canton, Columbus, Cleveland, you name it. And as I've gone around, it's interesting to see what all these different cities and regions are doing to either revitalize downtowns or just build up entrepreneurial communities. And I'll hand it to Dayton. I share this, pretty much every meeting as I'm having this type of conversation, that the collaboration and to have built the arcade and the hub downtown is really incredible. And that does not exist in every city, as you know. And it's a real testament to the leadership in the local community, and also just, everything from universities to co-working spaces and having classes there. It really is amazing. And there's a vibrancy that, as I've been in, and I know COVID has, made things difficult for every in-person gathering place. But it just is, it's really incredible. And for folks that are listening, or, as I get to travel and talk with people about these topics, I use it always as an example of probably the best community collaboration to build a physical place where people can go and connect and build together. And I just love how there's so many pieces, again, from the local universities bringing in classes to meet there to get, foot traffic in, and, you see entrepreneurs working there, and it just really is incredible. So, kudos to Dayton for putting this together, because it does not exist in every city. And living in Columbus, I'd love to see one like that here.
Well, Scott Korndike, who's been leading that charge with the arcade,
Yeah.
has had the focus, kept on the focus, and that's key, is to keep the focus, and go through those roadblocks
Yeah.
or over the roadblocks or whatever needs to be done.
Right.
But so
Yeah, I know those things aren't always easy
yeah,
for start, and then even running them. So I really mean that. It's for those listening. If you're ever in, get a stop in and grab a coffee, or get a day pass or something like that, because it really is great. And so, Dennis, maybe as a final kind of topic and question, before we go into some of the questions that we ask all our guests to get some kind of fun comparative answers, but want to talk a bit about Ohio's opportunity in terms of geopolitical just realities and what's happening internationally. And so we've talked about, AI and machine learning. We're seeing it with welcoming Intel and semiconductors and reshoring our supply chain. But I think often it's difficult for maybe a city or a state that doesn't, we don't have, a lot of work to do in international affairs, and, federal policy making and international policy making, happens in Washington, D.C., and, places abroad. But those examples of what you're all doing, the research happening with the Air Force directly, or again, things like Intel and resupporting supply chains, what does it mean, as you think about Ohio's opportunity in this space, with how difficult and complicated the world seems to be becoming? And we've lived through one great example of COVID. There seems to be more coming down the road, but really the Ohio opportunity to lead within the U.S. And if you're leading within the U.S., you're leading globally too.
Very, very good question. If you look what's happened across Ohio and is happening, it continues to happen with Intel coming in, the Honda battery factory, the Star Lab, which is a replacement for the International Space Station there at Ohio State, where the terrestrial ground station will be. There's some other things like that that are happening across the state that we really can't talk about yet. But Ohio is getting itself, thanks to Jobs Ohio and the governor's office and the legislators too, is how Ohio is really getting positioned for the future. In fact, it was an interesting discussion I had at the state legislature last week, is the OFRN program. We started flying orb research and development almost 3-4 years ago. And now we're starting some new activities for commercial space, hypersonics. And the way they put it, I never thought of it this way, but it's a good way. We're trying to get Ohio at the applied research and basic research to where the puck's going to be, versus following the puck. It's actually looking ahead to where's the puck going to be in 3 to 4 years, so that we're actually well positioned. And if you look, Sierra Nevada moving into Dayton, aircraft integration, which hasn't traditionally been done in Ohio. So there's a lot of new capabilities being brought to the state. Now we got to build the workforce, and make sure we're building out that workforce, not only for the short term, but the long-term sustainment of those new industries. But tremendous opportunity. And it will be not just at the national level, but the international level, with Intel, the Honda battery factory, Star Lab, which is being led by Voyager Nanorex. And so a tremendous opportunity for the state.
Yeah, it really is. And, what I also enjoy is you mentioned, some of the battery factories also. And, you have what's happening in your region. You have, Washington Courthouse in Fayette County welcoming Honda and LG. You have Ford in Lorain County. There's stuff happening in the Mahoning Valley. Of course, things like NASA Glenn and the Cleveland area. And there's these innovation districts. And I know more investment coming in that space. That it is spread out. And, of course, the supplier effect isn't for just one city or just one county or one region. But there's so much of this that's happening in different pockets, and that's something that I think should leave all of Ohio excited, and also create opportunity where if one region or one area is trying to kind of really place bets on what they're good at, now's an incredible time where we're seeing some of these things really play out, and advanced manufacturing and the future of mobility and transportation is just one example. And Ohio has a lengthy, proud history in that, and we're kind of seeing that next generation come back after. And I share that as someone who's from the Akron area, and we've had certainly our fair share of tough times over the years. So it's an exciting time for sure.
It is. So the Star Lab activity there at Ohio State is, and it's going to build off one of the primary industries of Ohio.
Yeah.
So it's agriculture is
Yep.
one of the focus areas, and the other is advanced manufacturing for space. So advanced agriculture with space.
Yeah.
So it's really building off the foundation of a lot of aspects of Ohio through that Star Lab facility. And I look back at when I was growing up, watching the Apollo launches. I'm dating myself here a little bit. And we're kind of in the same state again, where we're headed with space for the future. So, and Ohio is being positioned very uniquely to compete for many years to come. So,
yeah, it is. And that all, at least in my opinion, comes down to leadership and, the right people in the right seats that are coming together to make it happen. So Parallax is right there, part of it. So thank you for that. And Dennis, we'll go to kind of our final portion where we ask all of our guests. It's just a series of kind of short questions. The answers can be shorter, they can be a little bit longer, but it's fun to get the perspective of someone like you, CEO of an organization, to venture capitalists, to elected officials, and to kind of see different answers from different people across Ohio. But the first one is, what's a challenge that you're currently working to solve? And so sometimes this answer can be, really big picture if we're talking to a startup founder and they're trying to tackle one big thing, or as another kind of more micro example. In COVID, a lot of executive leadership were trying to figure out how to, balance this new world of remote work. So for you, a challenge that you're currently working to solve.
it's a good question too. So we've grown from 70 folks roughly 2 years ago to about 160 today.
Wow.
And a lot of it is virtual and trying to solve that problem of being connected, but also to build the culture and build the culture of the company. We really put a lot of emphasis on taking care of our people and talent development. But virtually it's hard. It's great to talk on a video call, but it's different than actually interfacing with someone. So we're looking for different ways to do that. The other is we developed a new strategic plan. We rolled it out about a year ago, and it's keeping our focus. And going after the large things. OEI was identified as a possibility of integrating with us to give us a statewide presence. And so we weren't viewed just as a Dayton company, but also a statewide company. And growing the talent and finding the right talent for growth in the future. But it's really keeping our focus. You go after shiny objects a lot. And sometimes you don't need to go after all those shiny objects. And so we're looking for ways to basically narrow the focus. But as you grow from a 50-person company to a 200-person company, you really have to change the business too. You got to put infrastructure in place that you didn't have as a smaller business. And you've also got to put processes in place sometimes too. And what we're trying to do is build an organization that operates like a skunk works. Back in the 70s and 80s out of Lockheed is one example.
Yeah.
Very agile, very rapid, but very collaborative, really solving tough national problems. So.
Yeah, that's great. And I can imagine that as being in the government space with the amount of the research opportunities coming out, that keeping the focus, as you said, is absolutely vital and key. And so question 2, and this is a little more fun, but a favorite read, listen, or watch. So this could be a book, a podcast, or a show. Maybe it's something that you enjoy to disconnect at the end of a day, or something that you revisit once a year as part of kind of being a CEO.
I'm a Tom Clancy fan.
Okay.
So anything Tom Clancy, including Jack Ryan,
Yeah.
That's part of my background too. So it sort of reconnects me to some of my past work or whatever. And books. It's probably the Clancy books too.
Yeah.
It's stretching the imagination a bit and what's possible. So
Yeah. Have you seen the new Jack Ryan on Amazon?
I have not. I unfortunately started it in the middle.
Okay.
I'm back starting over from the beginning.
Yeah,
So, but I
that's
have
good.
not.
Yeah, that's and my favorite kind of fun reads are if you've ever tried Daniel Silva's spy books.
Yep.
That's a favorite. You know, as you're trying to disconnect and think about a world completely different than the 9 to 5. So
Yes.
I'm there with you. Uh, Third question: if you had $100 million to invest as a to essentially solve a very very big problem, um, what would it be? Kind of, and this can be kind of very altruistic, so it doesn't have to necessarily have the biggest business case. So this can be very much a moonshot.
It would be workforce
Yeah,
development, and attracting talent, retaining talent in the state, but attracting other talent into the state to work these problems, whether it's the battery manufacturing or Intel manufacturing or Starlab. It would really be on the workforce because that will drive our future.
yeah,
And innovation in the state in these different domains, it's going to require talent and talent development. And getting experienced workforce into the state too is going to be part of the challenge. But that's where I would put the money.
yeah. That's a great answer. And then final two. The first one is, what is your favorite place in Ohio? So where when you have a weekend free or maybe folks visiting, where are you going? And then kind of this could be the same or it could be different, but your favorite meal. So maybe if you have some business folks coming in from DC, where are you taking them?
The favorite city is the three C's: Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. We get away to those three C's periodically from the Dayton region. And the favorite meal is not necessarily in Dayton. It was the Orchid down at the Nederland
Hmm.
down in Cincinnati. Unfortunately, it's closed now. Hopefully, they reopen that at some point. But in Dayton itself, it's the Oakwood Club, or it's the Flemings, or the Pine Club is a good place for a lot of our visitors. But it depends where the meetings are too, and where
Yeah.
the folks are coming in from. So
Yeah, for sure. Well, Dennis, this has been an enjoyable conversation for me. I'm big fans of the work you're all doing, the whole team, and again, there's a global importance to the work, and to have it in Ohio, being done by largely Ohioans. I know you have folks outside of Ohio too, but to be an Ohio headquartered company doing some incredibly important, especially these days, work. Thank you for that, and thanks for all that the Parallax team is doing, and for joining this conversation. How can people learn more about either you or Parallax if they'd like to, or any final comments you'd like to share?
you can find me on LinkedIn, although that might not be totally up to date. But also our website, which is parallaxresearch.org. And you'll see more press releases from us in the future about what's going on. We're really trying to create something different in Ohio, a nonprofit focused on advanced research. Other parts of the country have these, but in the Midwest, they're few and far between. And we're really trying to create something that's uniquely different, very collaborative, but very innovative, and forward-leaning, forward-looking for the future. So
Yeah.
we look forward to continuing the process. And Chris, thank you for the interview today, and looking forward to working with you in the future. So
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dennis, again. And we'll, for those listening or watching, we'll put in the show comments the website and your LinkedIn profile. Folks want to check that out. But thank you again for joining. Appreciate everyone for listening and watching. And we appreciate for everyone tuning in. So have a great day, everyone. Bye bye.
thanks, Chris.